Hello, everyone. Today on Agent Talk, we have Nick Mehta. He is a legend. I look up to him so much, especially as he built Gainsight into not only a category defining company, but he put customer success in the map. I remember I would call Nick at least twice or three times a year just to take notes on how is he thinking about the market, how is he thinking about category creation. And it's a powerhouse of a company, 1,400 employees. And what is his secret? It's a unique blend of analytical brilliance and genuine, very genuine human connection. He's building an incredible company that is mixing now SaaS and AI. And he now just bought a skill jar to bring even more power to what he's building. And I can't wait to share his tips and tricks to help you grow your company to the next level. Nick, so good to have you.
Manny, so great to see you here. Thank you so much. I have so much respect for you as well. I remember the stories of you coding the original software for outreach while you were with customers, and it's so awesome to see you doing it again.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So tell me, what is changing in SaaS? So what's happening with the AI model versus the seed model? You have a point of view that is very human centric. Tell me more about that. How is that evolving?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I can talk about a little bit from a business model perspective and from a value prop, because I think they're complementary but different. So the value prop side, I think, has been documented so much, which is the idea that with SaaS, you can move, start with agentic models like what you're doing, you can move closer from selling a tool to selling an outcome. Every SaaS company wanted to sell an outcome, including outreach and Gainsight and every other one. But ultimately, that outcome was constrained by humans taking action, right? Using outreach to send out communications or Gainsight to, manage customer risk, right? And obviously, that's created a lot of great businesses like yours and mine, and that's a lot of companies to scale. But ultimately, the value prop is still more of a tool, and that's where like per seat pricing comes from. I have a human. I'm going to give them a hammer. The hammer is going to let them be able to, build a wall. I actually have no idea how to construct anything. So this analogy is falling apart quickly. But I'm very intimidated. I want to go to Home Depot. But like that idea that like, okay, software is a tool. Now fast forward, and we're not 100% there by any means, but there's certainly use cases where agents can automate some or all of some of the manual work. And from a value prop perspective, you now move from selling tools to selling outcomes, right? Like Sarah Towell, who's a well-known VC, has a good blog
I
post.
love her. I
Yeah,
love her. She was
you
one of
probably
my
see
inspirations to start this company. Yeah,
she's so smart,
100%.
and sell work, not software, sell work. And so what that's enabling is rethinking pricing models. Like I remember when people early days of Gainsight, people would say, oh, you should sell it based on outcomes, retention, churn reduction. And I'd be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, except two problems. Number one, the CFO doesn't actually want to pay that way because they view us as a tool. So let's say they improve their retention by 5 points. They don't want to give a percentage of that to the software vendor, right? That's not how they view us. Number two is we didn't control the outcome because our technology was the hammer, right? But
Right, right, right.
now it's totally changing. The AI is allowed to do more of the work, take more credit for that work. But then what's happening in the back end, which we can talk a lot about, is it's changing then the business model, right? So, the old model, that the theoretical model was you spend this money or you build software, you acquire a customer, you spend that customer acquisition cost, and then they generally should stay a long time. And in the core SaaS business, the challenge is that's actually really hard. It's hard to keep people a long time. So it's actually SaaS is probably more challenging than most people thought. And then now what's happening is obviously this new way of doing things becomes really disruptive. Where it's like SaaS, I'm really excited to learn from you, but it's like SaaS, but if it's outcome based, it's not this like predictable retention thing. And so we had to kind of reinvent all of our concepts for the agentic world. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. We were talking before the start of going from 0 to 1, and the whole SaaS industry and maybe all of humanity is going from 0 to 1 again. And that's pretty cool.
So how are you repositioning? Like, what are the like top three things that you're doing at Gainsight to reposition to execute in this agentic world where people are expecting a bit more outcomes and less tools?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, all I think about. If you were in our board meetings or in my staff meetings, it's like, no surprise, like every responsible company, you'd be like, oh my gosh, AI is the vast majority of what we think about. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's two parts. There's a strategy and then there's the branding, which is what you asked about. It's very relevant because that's what we're doing right now. So strategy wise, we have a great president who's my kind of right-hand person. He came up with a pretty simple framework, which is you can think of generative AI and SaaS in three phases. It's a tool that's like an executive assistant for an employee. That's like phase one. It's a tool that's like an analyst for a leader. And then phase three, it's a tool that's a way to then automate work. Okay, so each phase is a little different. The first phase, where it's an assistant, it's basically embedded in the software, whether it's Outreach or Gainsight or whatever, helps you write the email, helps you summarize the customer meeting document. Really, like in some ways obvious now, although they seemed magical a year ago. And the great thing about that is it's just embedded in your work. We have an agent in Slack that you can ask questions to. There's a co-pilot in Gainsight, stuff like that. That none of that's going to sound like, oh my God, I can't believe you can do that. But like makes you much more productive. But it's still more like a tool, right? Phase two was AI as an analyst. And the idea here is,
So in phase one, are you invoking the tool to help you, or is the tool proactively saying, Nick, do this, do that?
good question. There are really two models, as you know. There's what you could call the Copilot model, because Microsoft's Copilot is so omnipresent, where it's kind of side pane, you ask questions, it gives you an answer. And so that is you could call that the pull model. You're pulling the information. And then there's the push model, which is I'm in Gainsight and I see something and it says, hey, by the way, you might try to do X instead. Right. And so we're doing both. And just like an assistant, you might Slack them and say, hey, can you schedule this meeting? Or they may Slack you and say, hey, I noticed you're a little too busy today. You want me to move some stuff off your calendar? So that's phase one, assistant. Phase two is analyst. So one of the things that's interesting about SaaS is it was really high value for end users most of the time. But for leaders, they kind of didn't really use any of this stuff. They got the
100%.
reports or a dashboard or an analyst, right? But there were a lot of constraints there. Like, I don't have enough analysts to meet with me or enough, the BI stuff is complicated. And so phase two is like, I can use AI to be the best analyst possible. So in this example, we bought a company called Staircase.ai, and it basically analyzes every communication in real time, every email, every meeting, every support case, runs it through large language models, and then tells you stuff about your customers. Why are they churning, and like which ones are at risk, which ones are not multi-threaded. And leaders are like, oh my God, I used to have to ask my employees to type the stuff into Gainsight or Salesforce and do reports, and now it's there. So phase two, the analyst is really valuable, and it's happening in lots of different areas. The one that I'd argue is probably the most well known is all the call recording technologies, including the one Outreach has, that give leaders visibility into what's going on. So that's phase two, the analyst. It wasn't possible before AI.
And how deep does it go? Like, one of the things that Gainsight nailed is the whole playbook for retention and
Yeah.
expansion, right?
Yeah.
And the playbook is a little static, right? Like you come up with it, you roll it out, and like you tell everybody. Is the analyst analyzing your own playbook and saying like, look, it's not working here, or it's not working for this case, or it's getting a little old?
Yeah, a great question. That's the direction. I don't think most of the tools, including ours, are there yet. What it's doing more now is like, hey, you haven't talked to this customer in a while. Hey, this customer seems really upset. This one, you're only talking to one person in the account. So that's the level of insights. It's
Got
not
it.
telling you what to drive action on. But I want to say one thing about that. I'm a huge believer in as the world evolves and maybe has a revolution, you have to be willing to like reinvent your own company too. And sometimes say things you did don't make any sense anymore. So I'll say something that is incredibly sacrilegious because it's heart of what Gainsight has historically done. You mentioned static playbooks, right? And I'd argue that almost all enterprise software has the following paradigm. We bring in data from disparate systems, connectors, Salesforce, whatever. We use some kind of ETL type stuff to combine it. ETL is like data integration stuff, right? We then have rules that say if this, then that. Some human designed those rules. We then have workflow for humans to take action based on those rules. And then we have reports for managers to say, did people take the action, right? I'm not just talking Gainsight. That's exactly what Salesforce does, literally. It's almost like
100%.
software. I argue that model's totally broken. It's broken because users have to take manual action. It's broken because ops has to define rigid rules. It's broken because the leaders have to like do reports on data that's inherently low quality because the users entered it. And so I kind of tell the team, I'm like, yeah, let's just, we have a lot of important customers. We're going to support them. We're going to innovate. But let's remember that some of those paradigms don't make sense anymore.
I wish what you're saying is so true. And I wish that many of will come out and say, look, our previous paradigm is broken. Our new paradigm is the future. You see what I mean?
Yeah, be
Because,
really.
but he doesn't say that. Like he said, oh yeah, you need customer 362. And like, we know we don't. I mean, everything is moving agentic. And because of exactly that reason, like the static playbook doesn't work as it doesn't adapt to where the ball is in the field.
That's so well said. It's interesting about one thing I've reflected on a lot is one of the all-time famous business books is called Innovator's Dilemma. It's by a guy named Clayton Christensen, HBS professor, rest in peace. He passed away. And the whole idea is basically almost every time there's a discontinuous change in business, most companies don't make it because they're not willing to say, hey, our old stuff doesn't make any sense anymore. And they're not willing to tell their customers that, and they're not willing to tell the market that, their employees. And therefore they get stuck where they're trying to do these new things, but they just put a little bit of attention on them and they're still focused on their core. And honestly, the hardest thing for CEO, including us, is like steering that ship. Be able to say, like, you know what? Like I told our employees, I know everyone wants a feature where you can change the drop down in the UI to let it sort way, something like that. I'm not even saying it pejoratively. It's probably like a legit, but we can do that, or we can like reinvent the future for where things are going. And in the long term, customers get so much more value that way. And I
100%.
believe it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to just be willing to say, no, we're not going to do that because that's the path.
That is so well said. What is your advice for those who are navigating this change right now? Like everyone in SaaS needs to figure out what is the dynamic playbook that reacts to the situation in the field as it stands, not to your playbook.
Yeah, I mean, if I had like magic advice, I'd be Oracle trading the market or something. But I'll give you three things that I think a lot about that help. Number one is just immerse yourself. As personally immerse yourself. And I am perhaps past the point of healthy level of obsession with AI, right? Try to read every paper you can, watch every video from all the different model vendors, try stuff out, every startup, use whatever your favorite chat GPT, whatever, to just be your like kind of daily sounding board. I mean, if you look at my like side log at ChatGPT, it's just like, hundreds of conversations per day. And so if you do that, phase one, I think you'll just see that this is the biggest change ever. And you'll start drinking the Kool-Aid because it's real. The only reason people don't think it's real is if they haven't just dug in very deeply, right? Phase two, then, to me, is imagine then, okay, given this information, you are Manny starting a new company. And what are you doing? Are you building the forms with the drop down, whatever, or are you reinventing the world? And as a CEO, even if you have 1,000+ people, you gotta like have that attitude, which is like, I'm going to pretend I'm the company that's a startup that's coming for us and build the agentic stuff or whatever. And I'm going to go do it better. And then the third one, I think this advice I got recently, because I've struggled a lot with like the idea that you can build something right now. And then 2 weeks later, some underlying technology can evolve. And the way you did it was kind of irrelevant, right?
Right,
So
right,
you
right.
think about, since the beginning of the year, after OpenAI 4.0, we had like 4.1, we had 4.5, we had new image generation, we had DeepSeek, we had many models of Anthropic, we had Gemini 2.5, we had Llama 4. And by the way, MCP, and if you don't know those acronyms, doesn't matter for the folks listening. It's just the volume changes so high. And so I was talking to an entrepreneur who's in this space of AI, agentic stuff. And I said, how do you deal with it? He's like, we just say, what can we build in the next week? The idea of like, what's our roadmap 6 months from now is absolutely ridiculous. And so what are we going to build next week? That's what I tell myself.
How, like, dude, engineering teams have been built around this like long arc of
Yes.
building and leave me alone for like 1 month because we're building this thing and like I need to iterate for like a whole quarter and now you're saying you build in a week or you vibe code in a day, you know what I mean, to
Yes.
then build in a week. So what are you telling your engineering teams to go do in the middle of this disruption?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think some of it is you bring in people that have different mindsets, right? Because I do think it's for all of us, it's very hard to just spontaneously change the way we work, even with like obvious data. We have habits, right? And I think some of it's bringing engineers with different habits. We bought this company Staircase and they were just an AI first company. So like everything they think about is pretty different, right? Like
Right,
they
right,
think a
right,
lot
right.
about training and RLHF, and which is for folks to know reinforcement learning through human feedback, things like that, where it's like it's a different model than traditional deterministic software. That's had a huge impact because then they're percolating that knowledge. Their second thing we did was we hired a
So it's like
CTO.
a DNA change. It's like a little bit of a blood
Yeah.
transfusion to try
And you're
to.
like, you're planting the seed with this, sounds bad because it's like a new virus, but a good virus. It's going to like spread around. Yeah. It's not a mean virus. And
That's
then
right, that's right.
we hired a CTO who's amazing. And this is a huge decision, which frankly, we're still vacillating on a little bit. He worked with my president before. This guy's like incredible. Like I first time I met him, literally, we went for a walk, and I'm probably like I'm super nerdy. So the walk, like in an hour, we covered, generative AI model training, quantum physics, the nature of philosophy, math, and I was like, I want to be your best friend. This is like our new CTO. And and so
Call me, call
yeah,
me.
please call me. Yeah. And so anyways, this guy, one of the big decisions we had, and we're still thinking about, but we made a preliminary, is do we make him like the CTO thing about all of Gainsight, including all the like stuff we've had for a while, or do we make him the CTO for the new stuff? And what's interesting is we decided, at least near term, just focus on new stuff, right? We could have, his name's Prem. Prem, he could go on everything in Gainsight, sure. And you'll get spread thin and you'll be dealing with escalations and bugs and blah. Or you could be like we want to launch something. We have a Pulse conference in May, which we're launching like some really cool agents around AI and kind of adoption and things like that. Prem, just go after that. Small tiger team. Don't like go like work with our hundreds of engineers. I think that's a really hard decision. Do you take your most talented people and just focus them on new stuff? Or do you have them do everything? And it's there's not an easy answer.
That's amazing. So let's pick on this, launch of AI agents that you're doing, because I picked that from a couple of from a conversation I think you had with I think it was either a SaaS or before that you talked about the three different ways in which CSMs evolve, or like customer success evolves. It's either going to be technical, meaning you become the deep technical experts that ensures adoption and the usage, or you become, you merge with an account manager and you become economically driven and financially driven, or you just turn atoms into bits,
Yes.
right? You become agentic, right? And when you're becoming agentic, and I know you don't like this, but I'm going to push on it. You are taking a role and replacing a seat. Like that part, there used to be a person, and now you're saying there's not going to be a person
No,
who's
no,
going to
I
be
don't
an online
I have to
experience.
be honest. Yeah, I need to be honest, right? Totally.
And so, tell me more about what happens as seats decline and your agentic workforce takes over. How is
Yeah.
that going to work out?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're right. Like some if you kind of look at the architecture of a business post sale, and not just SaaS, but in business in general, there's a lot of roles, right? I'm sure you have this man. I know Outreach has them because you guys have a huge commitment to your customers. And so you had probably professional services people and support people and
100%. We got one of each.
CSMs, yeah, sorry, right? And the customers, overwhelmed. They're like, who do I talk to and stuff, right? It's not very efficient. Employees have like feelings of like overlap and who's, I'm sure this was your old
Who
life.
owns the account? I own the account. I have a better relationship. They like me better.
Hopefully you don't have to deal with that as much now that you do get startup again. I'm very jealous. What's really interesting is I'll come to the seed thing in a second because it's very relevant to what I'm going to say. A big thing is you can rethink the roles, right? So why do we have all these roles? Well, one part of it is there's just a lot of time, so you can't have one person doing everything. There's too much stuff to do. Another one is specialization. You have a technical account manager because they know the product really well. And you have a salesperson because they know the pricing and the configuration relationships, right? So there's a specialization, there's a just time. And then there's also, of course, a mindset and talent. Like some people want to be in sales and CS, and there's sometimes different. But what's going to be awesome is we can rethink the roles around the customer. We don't need so many fragmented roles because we can say, what can agents do and other AI tools do that can then like become part of this workflow, and you can then have fewer roles. So what that practically will mean, and I'm very confident, is that yeah, you won't, for a given client that you're serving, you won't need as many people serving. Now, whether you use that extra dollars to go invest in your product and you need more people there, and that's like a different question which we could talk about. But practically for this given customer, you will not need a CSM and a TAM and a support person and an account manager, and it's going to be awesome for the customer, right? They're going to have fewer people, and they'll be able to be like know the whole thing. And so what I believe is the people that will kind of still be there in the post agentic world will be people that know that have really good relationship skills. That's hard for AI to do, and that really know a domain well, which AI can do a little bit, but humans can help a lot, right? But do you
100%.
need somebody emailing you and say, hey, we have a new feature in Outreach or Gainsight, would love to have you check it out? No, like that's totally easy. In fact, AI will do it better than
So
you.
10 years ago.
It's
So 10
so,
years ago.
and so what happened is for a software vendor, Outreach, Gainsight, anyone else, we have an opportunity because it's a competition in some ways. Who's going to be the agentic framework for this post-sale journey, right? Is it going to be Is it going to be a CRM vendor, right? Is it going to be a support vendor, et cetera? And so what it'll allow you to do is, yes, there will be fewer seats. There's just no doubt in my mind. But who's going to get the seats from a software vendor, right?
Right. So that's my question. So like in every deploy, take one of your customers, I don't know, Cisco, for instance, right? Like they have you deploy and they have, ServiceNow deployed, and they may have a little bit of Zendesk, they may have a little bit of this. And I'm sure they're all contesting for the same sort of like workflow, right? Of like making their customer success. So how are you defending that turf? How are you expanding that turf? Like where are you attacking? Where are their flanks? What's your
Yeah.
overall strategy there?
Yeah. I mean, reveal my secret plans, Manny.
Come on.
Okay. If I tell you, you promise nobody on the internet will know.
Nobody will hear this.
They won't
Everybody
hear
cover
this.
their ears, and here you go.
Well, so it's interesting you mentioned like some joint customers because, of course, Outreach Gainsight, lots of joint customers. And I remember we're rolling out at SAP enterprise wide. They were using us a few pockets. I think
Nicely done.
they're
Nicely
also
done.
doing business with Outreach, right? And I
Yeah.
remember meeting them and them saying, our strategy is not customer success. It's not like sales enablement. It's not sales productivity or anything else. It's the customer engagement journey. And that should have all of that tied together. But what's the reality now? The reality is, yeah, they're like, using Gainsight and Outreach and probably stitching it together through all kinds of, workflow and so on and so on, right? And that's not what people want. That's not. So what's interesting is like we can redesign the whole way our software works. Sometimes it's like one vendor doing everything. Sometimes it might be like some agents interacting with other agents, but the customer has a more seamless experience. And so what are we doing strategy wise? Well, part of it's, of course, the R&D investment and, just my time investment, my president, et cetera. But part of it is then telling this story to the market. And this is what you had asked about before that I didn't answer, the branding side, right? So what does Gainsight do, right? Okay, well, I go around in tech and say, what's Gainsight do? I think the number one answer will be like, I think it's that CEO with the weird LinkedIn videos. That would be like the number one answer on what does Gainsight do. But the number two
They're
answer,
legendary, man. Just keep it coming. Like you're inspiring with that
here,
stuff. But
thanks.
yeah.
The number two answer is going to be, something like, oh, they make customer success software. They make like, I don't know, like a CRM for CSM, something. It'll be something like that. And of course, in my mind, I'm like, it's so much more than that. What are you talking about? I'm sure you have the same thing where it's like Outreach is an SDR tool versus no. Outreach is a whole sales platform, right? Like
100%.
so much more than what people think it does. But what we need to do is reshape that thinking, right? We want it to be like Gainsight's a provider of agentic resources for the customer journey, right? And we're getting the words, but it's something like that, right? And so, yeah, what we're trying to do is a really radical reimagination. And so we have our Pulse conference, which is our big event every year, as Manny knows, and it's coming up at the end of May. And we're super excited to just bring everyone together and just like unveil, like, here's like who we are. And like some of it is also, I think, the visuals. If you look at this is very nerdy, but you've been thinking about our website and you look at the AI first companies like yourself, their like visual experience is different. Like the way it feels on their website is different, right? Of course, the products are very different too. And so I think we have to like really connote to people in a big way, this is different. And this is where what's interesting about agentic is it's partly a marketing challenge. How do I convince my market the Gainsight's really different than what you thought, and it's pretty interesting. It's a challenge.
You invented a category once, and I remember that when I called you and I asked you about category creation, you were like, "Well, I invented the job, and then everything followed." Are you recutting the job, and everything follows, or is it a completely new category creation exercise?
Well, first of all, I didn't invent the job. Definitely, like a lot of people did. Salesforce should get the most credit because they started the idea. But thank you. And so definitely, I would say like we're like the cheerleader of the job is a good way to say it. But yeah, it is a reinvention, and it's funny because I always told myself, like people say, oh, category creation, you guys really did that. I'm like, yeah, I don't ever want to do it again. It's like I always say, like, I'm actually 20 years old, but category creation makes you look like you're 47.
100%.
But, it is new category creation. It's more than that. It's new, like you said, it's a new way that companies exist and work exists and jobs exist. And so for somebody, I love all this stuff, like just the first principles thinking and all that. It is really fun because you're not like, hey, there's this product out here. Let's make this new product that has a faster user interface. We're going to replace the old product. It's not like that at all. It's like, oh, there's this way that companies work, and let's just like reimagine the entire thing and hopefully be part of that equation. And so I think part of it is it's realizing it's more than category creation. And then part of it is realizing the old playbooks won't apply. So, the last thing I'll just say, and hopefully this will be your experience as well. It's incredible how capital efficient these new companies are, right?
It's
You know,
mind blowing.
it's
Mind
insane.
blowing good.
Cursor development tool through AI, and it's a 200 plus million of AR with 30 people, right? Like, I mean, things I could never even imagine. And so I think part of it is, yeah, there's going to be a kind of category creation. It's going to be huge, but it can be very different. Gainsight spent, 150 million of venture capital to way over 200 million revenue, but so it's pretty good. But it's not in this new world, not good, And I have to rethink what is the cost model, investment model, everything for category creation. So it's fun in a way because you have to write it all again.
So I bet that SAP came to you and asked you, what's my headcount plan for my CS organization next year? Now you
Yes.
guys are rolling this out. What do
Yes.
you tell somebody what your headcount plan is now that you're rolling this out, this new technology? What's happening to headcount?
Yeah, inside our customers. Yeah, it's so I think most people, there's a change that's like they're not totally ready for yet. And this is the interesting challenge, is that when you're a huge company like SAP or any large company, there's a lot of change management. Like literally just to deploy the
Right.
classic version of Gainsight or Outreach or anything, just a lot of change management, a lot of work, right? So that's when you look at the clients, especially the bigger they are, this stuff is a little harder to put their finger on. Right? Like it's
Right.
harder to be like, okay, well, how am I going to move this to agentic? And SAP's org is, they would say themselves is there's a lot there, a lot of layers, a lot of jobs, way more complicated than I made it seem. And so, of course, that means younger companies are going to adopt this stuff sooner, right? But I think one of the things we've tried to tell people is let's just identify what is the lowest value part of the work. What's the
Mm,
part of the work that's doesn't really doesn't need a human? And so, like as an example that we're one of the big ones working on is just like all of the adoption related campaigns and stuff like that. Hey, you haven't used this feature, and there's a lot you can do to automate that in a very customer centric AI first way. So, in the example of SAP, that's really relevant to their strategy. And so, we're finding that when we pitch it not as like, hey, agents to do everything in the customer journey, because that's just not realistic yet, but we just say an agent to drive adoption of your SaaS applications by analyzing what people are doing and then driving like personalized outreaches, whatever.
right.
That really resonates. It doesn't matter if you're a big company, small company, because it's like a discrete piece of work. So when I think about it, long term, yeah, you probably end up replacing seats. Short term, you're replacing atomic tasks, which is very
Mm,
easy, much easier to digest.
interesting. But pushing on that a little bit, these atomic tasks have a value, right? They have an outcome, meaning if you deploy this agent, something is going to get adopted, right?
Correct.
So that is a job to be done
Yes.
in which you're deploying this agent. So
Right.
how do you, if it wasn't for the agent, a human will have to go do that work and be accountable for that same job to be done. So we're back to headcount, right? Like
Well, that's the thing. I think it's more about how does somebody, this cheesy cliche, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And I don't know who's eating elephants. So I don't understand why that analogy came up. Please don't eat elephants. They're really beautiful animals. But it's sort of like for a company, they're like, where do I start? And I think that, like a lot of work, if you take like, let's say, you have a job and, you have, you work, 40 hours a
yeah,
week,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And there's like something that takes you an hour a week. Okay. Now you have an agent to do that or some way to automate it. So now you have 39 hours a week of work. It's not like they need 1/40th fewer employees, right? Like that's not actually how it works. Cause like
right, right, right,
the, either the person works 39 hours a week or maybe they do something else for that
right.
40th that's valuable or not.
Yeah, they probably just get to the task that we're not getting to, right, at this
The
point.
tasks they weren't getting to, right? And so short term, I think it will feel like, oh, we just have more time to do more stuff or have a better life, et cetera, right? So that's the positive. I think that will absolutely happen. And then there's, I think, a tipping point where it's like, let's say I have found ways to automate out of your 40-hour week 30 hours. Then, yeah, the CFO starts saying, well, great, we don't need as many people. And I think, as people, the huge debate is, will AI take the, efficiency and use it to have less jobs, or will it take the efficiency and let you do more stuff? Aaron Levy from Box has written a lot about like how sometimes it'll allow companies to do more, which is I think really cool. And I think it's not an either or. I think some companies, if you have like an infinite market, an infinite number of ideas, if you save time, you will reinvest it in those new ideas and those new concepts. If you're a company that is limited in what you can do and you have a way to cut costs, then you're just going to bank the profits, you know? So
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
like this, there's some of these, like there's a company called Even Up where they basically like do, I don't know if you met the founder there, but they use AI to help personal injury lawyers the amount of effort it takes. Those are the people at the billboard on the side of the highway, right? When you have your injury and you
Does your
call,
neck hurt?
yeah,
We'll get you paid.
exactly. And you call 1-800, call Nick, and then Nick comes. What happens is there's some kind of letter. I think it's called demand letter that gets sent to the like the restaurant where you fell in, right? That's the work, and they're using AI to automate some of that, like those letters, which are done by paralegals. And these are really small businesses. That's like literally the one person and the billboard and the paralegal or something like that, right? Not always, but and in that situation, if you're the founder of that company and you can automate some of that paralegal work or all of it, you're not like, oh, great, I'm going to use this for more stuff. You're going to be like, sweet, I can go take my kids on vacation, really nice vacation this year, right? Like, because you're not going to go put that money into something else. You're just going to be like, great, I will have more money. And so I think what's going to happen, it's always a basic economics thing. If a company has more things it can do, it will use the money to do more, and therefore will not to cut. Yeah,
That's a Jevons paradox, right? Like
and
if you
that's
can do more, like
it's Janus paradox. Folks that don't know what it is, you can Google it. And the thing is basically like the way I think about it is public companies. So there's some public companies that have so many growth ideas that they can take all their profit and reinvest them in growth, and they make some money. The most famous would have been Amazon back in the day when they were losing money, but just Jeff Bezos convinced people, don't worry, it'll be great. But then companies eventually like sometimes run out of ideas, run out of market, and then they start taking that excess profit and doing dividends, doing buybacks, right? Or acquiring companies, which is great. But what that means is the organic idea, the well has been tapped. And so I think what's going to happen is for the companies where the well has been tapped, this will be about cutting headcount. For the company where the well is still limitless, like let's say Microsoft today, it'll be about doing more. So I think it's a disingenuous for people to just be on one side or the other. I think it's gonna be both.
I agree with you. I just don't think that the headcount is gonna accrue to the same job. I think the headcount is
No,
gonna accrue to other jobs. Like I
different
had a
job.
conversation with a CEO of DocuSign on
Yeah,
about 2 years
yeah,
ago, and he was like, okay, so what's my headcount budget for SDR next year? And where do I redeploy the same
right.
budget? And I'm like, that's a great question. Let me get back to you on that because like agents weren't real yet, but you can see it coming, right? So you have to kind of plan ahead for it. Okay, one last question. This is for
Okay.
our audience. How does a pure agentic company run success? Like, what is different for this whole new breed of companies that are hyper efficient and there is no surface area of product per se? It's just agents running in the background doing stuff for it.
Oh my gosh, such a good question. Actually, I want to like do, separately, like ask you that question too, because I think it's, well, yeah, you're probably thinking like everything is different now, right? You built this amazing company and everything's going to be different. So in success, I think there's an interesting paradox. You may know this, but some of the companies that have these incredible new agentic tools, for example, like content writing, things like that, or your old world of like automated like communications to prospect, right? Some of them have massive like
Yeah, 100%.
numbers that I've never seen. Like somebody said, oh, it's 70% churn. I'm like, oh, you need 70% retention.
That's adorable. Try
Oh
50%,
my God.
60%.
And so when I heard it, I was like, wow, there's a success challenge here. Not to do it in the same way as people used to do.
Opportunity.
Infinity, right? I like it. And you look at that and you're like, wow. Now these companies spend less to acquire customers, so it's obviously the less you spend to acquire, the higher churn you can have. But yeah, I haven't done the math for every one of them, but I think 70% churn, you're unsustainable. And so what I believe the challenge is as much magic you are building in your company or we're trying to build with our agents or anyone else is, human change is really hard. So like that's the thing, right? We're so inertial. So a fundamental part of what success as a concept is, not the role, is changing people's behavior. And so I think like I see this in my own company. We of course like everyone using tons of AI tools for coding and stuff, right? But I'm so frustrated that we're not moving faster, and it's because people have like ingrained habits, right, of what they do and how they do it. And so what I think is going to happen is either the vendors that are agentic or other third party companies are going to have what you might call consulting practices that are like, let me help you re-engineer your go-to-market process
Oh,
so that you
interesting.
can make it more agentic, and you can call that success, call it services. You can use a third party to do it, like another company, like an Accenture or whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
that needs to be done.
So it's a fundamental rethink of the human in the human behavior for it
100%.
to stick the landing.
You can plug and play Lovable, which is a development tool through AI, or your favorite AI outreach tool, should be outreach, but there's a lot of them out there.
100%.
And we use outreach, and so you can plug those into your stack. If you're like a tiny company, you can use all that stuff and very easily because it's like one or two people. But if you're like a enterprise company deploying one of these AI tools, if you don't have some advice, some consulting resources, you're going to buy the AI tool, you're going to churn it, like guaranteed. In fact, when I talk
100%.
to customers, it's interesting closing thought. I ask customers, hey, what AI tools are you using, right? And I ask, of course, the AI startups, what customers do you have? So I'm kind of hearing the story on both sides. And the AI startups like, oh, we got this big deployment with this big company and they're all in on it. And I asked that same customer, so the client of the AI startup, and they're like, yeah, we're doing a proof of concept. We're not sure if it's the right thing or not. We just want to play around with it. And so if you're an AI agentic product or company, you think you have customers, they think they're doing a trial. That's like the bottom line. And if you
Good.
don't figure out the success equation in that, you're not going to get a customer. You're not going to keep.
I'm gonna take that and frame it. So we here call it Vibe revenue. And what we're trying to figure out is whether Gainsight is gonna fix the Vibe revenue problem.
We're working on
Because
it. I love it.
because if you fix that, you take it to the next level.
I love it. Man, it's always so fun talking to you. I love it.
It was awesome. Nick, as usual, a pleasure. We learn so much every time we talk to you, and this is going to be so useful for our audience. I can't believe we did this. This is amazing. Thank you so much.